Hi, welcome back. This is part 2 of our Happy Halloween Haunted House Graveyard box card. In the first video, we put together the outside and the inside pieces, and in this video, we're going to put together all of the interior pieces of this box card. So sit back and enjoy, and there'll be a part 3 where we finish up the decorations. Alrighty, welcome back. So after yesterday's sunshine, I decided to upgrade the lighting, make it a little bit easier to see my videos. Hopefully this helps. And where we left off was we have the outside of the card as well as the inside all glued on, and the card is fully formed. Now for this card, I opted to design the exterior so that the larger section would fold to the left. And so that way I can have things coming off to the left edge because they won't be in the way from the fold. And when I was at my local craft store last week, I found this awesome little tree cut out and thought that there's probably some use for it somewhere. So I bought a couple of these little die cuts. I have no idea, based on the edges on it, it does look like it came from a die, not from a cutting machine. But there it is. And because this is going to be able to extend off to the left, I'm going to put the taller, branchier stuff in that direction and then leave the open area to the right, because that's where our house will go in the background. So let's get started. The next step is to cut the pieces that are going to go across on the inside that will hold up all of our little die cut pieces. For this, I'm going to have a graveyard scene leading up to the haunted spooky house. Off camera, I cut apart different pieces from the graveyard set by Holtz, and I use these nifty little bead bags and jewelry bags to hold all my small little die cut pieces together. That way I don't lose track of them. I used a scrap of vellum on the ghost as well as more of that black cardstock. I also cut out the front gate and glued that together. And I cut this piece of the sticker backer paper to be 3 inches wide, so I knew how far across I couldn't exceed. It turns out that these pieces, when they're glued together, don't quite come out to 3 inches, so I was okay. The side panels for the gate actually come out to be just the right length for the 2 inches going across, so those I was good. So, on to the next step. The next step then is to cut the cross pieces, and I thought it would look kind of cool if I had a little bit of a hill. So from this black cardstock, I had this 1.5 inch wide strip by 11 inches long, and I took a piece of scrap white paper, measured it to 3 inches wide, and I drew out a hill, because I'm going to have a hill from one side and then a hill from the other side, and then the front I'm going to have be a valley. And I'm going to use this and cut this out as a template so that I have an even hill going across each side. Now this is fairly thick cardstock, which makes it easy to trace around. Now this 11 inch piece of paper will cut 2 4-inch wide strips, and the reason why we need it 4-inch wide is because we need a 1/2 inch on either side to fold into the card. So let's cut those and score those. And only after I get them scored and folded will I cut out the area for the hills. Now this 3-inch piece will actually fit real nice right across the front. Now I'm going to score on one side and then flip and score on the other side for the other end. And that's because we want this to be in a Z shape. As you fold the card, one side's going to go in one direction and one side's going to fold in the other direction. And as it lays flat, the folds are going in the right direction. Before we get too far, let's make sure that they fit inside the card. And those appear to be the right width. So now I can lay down my hill and use a pencil to trace around it. And because this is 1.5 inches wide, I only made the hill go down about 1/2 inch. And that way I don't have to, if there's lots left over, I can put this up as far as I want and still have enough connecting onto the card below. However, because it's only 1/2 inch, I don't have to worry about it sticking up too far and blocking the view of the house in the background. So here's one piece. Now you might notice that I actually flipped it and I'm doing it from the other side. That's because I want the pencil edge to be facing in the back. I could have cut this to the same, in each, the same direction and flipped it around, but I didn't want to have to worry about there being this little glare from the pencil line. So I can just put it in the back and not even worry about it. Now, for this last piece, when I drew out my hill, I drew it with a line down the middle, so I knew exactly where the middle was. And then I'll round that out as I cut it. So this piece is actually going to be attached using some foam because I want it to stand away from the front edge of the gate, because the front edge of the gate is going to be glued behind the edge of the card. And so I want that to then stick out a little bit further. In order to make sure that I have enough area to glue the legs of the gate and the front panels, I'm actually going to put the glue or the foam a little bit further down so that it doesn't interfere with where I'm trying to glue in the front gate. And I'm going to do this before I do the gate to make it easier to reach in there. So, the very first thing we're going to do is we're going to glue these pieces in. We're going to start with our house, and we're going to put that on some foam as well. So I want a little bit of dimension behind the house. And that can just stick all the way on. Now this piece is actually wider than the card, so I'm going to trim off a little bit on each edge. To make sure that it fits in here. And I want the house to be down just a little. And because we added the tree, I'm actually going to cut off a good amount of this base here because I want to be able to have it come up to this edge here. Make sure I don't put the foam tape over my little balcony here. And in fact, I'm going to set it back a little bit further. I'm going to put a little bit up at the top to provide some support to the top. This foam tape loves its backing. Oh my goodness. I've had such challenges getting the backing paper off. Now in the background I'm going to put some of the bats, like they're flying behind the house. The bats came out of the haunted house die set. And a moon, and I'm going to go see if I can find the little moon that I cut out in just a second. So for this bat, I do want to use a little tiny glue dot, because that way I'll be able to have a little bit of dimension, but not as much as with the haunted house. Alright, I found my moon. And let's put that down first, and that way we'll know exactly where we're going to put the bats. Boy, if there is ever a use for a fine tip adhesive, this little tiny moon would be it. Now, because we put the moon that way, we can actually put a little tiny bat in front of it and adhere those with some small, tiny glue dots. These are 1/8 of an inch glue dots, and we'll see if they are small enough to go behind my bat. Actually, you know what? I'm going to use the smallest bat furthest away behind the moon. We're going to make them bigger as they're coming forward. Okay, so there we have that. Now the next layer will be a layer of hill. We're going to put that one off to the right. So I'm going to put some tape along this edge and along this edge, and we'll put that in place. Now I like to use 3/8 of an inch tape on a 1/2 inch flap like that. That way I know it's wide enough, but it's not going to overhang. And this goes with this edge along the back. And then we had that 1/2 inch flap that held the card together, and that gives me a good guide for where the 1/2 inch for this flap needs to go. This is a little tricky to see, so I'm just going to do one side first and then the other. Oh, you know what? We're going to do hill to the left to start with, not to the right. So we'll save that piece, because I want the lower part of the hill to be where the tree is on the other side, so we'll hold that one. So, hill to the left, find our other hill. Now, I should have thought of this before I put the tape on. because this is going to come up higher than the edge of the card, you don't want to put glue the whole way. So I'm actually going to pull this edge off on the tape. Now this piece lines up where the flap is right here, and we know that that's a 1/2 inch away. And that will help guide the next piece as well. I don't know if you can see that real well. You kind of need to hold it shut until you get it into position, and then you can let the edge touch the card. There we go. Now we got one hill. Now we're going to do the other hill. And again, this just lines up, and we're going to pull the tape down on this side too. Obviously, this is not a card that I made prior to starting this. So this is just, on this side, it's going to line up with the front edge of where this is. So that gives us a nice 1/2 inch gap there too. And this will stick up a little bit. And we'll just cut that top flap off because we don't want that out in the middle of the card like this. There we go. Clean that up a little bit. So now let's start to decorate this a little bit before we put the tree in. And that'll be easier than trying to fight with stuff in front of it. So I'm going to put a piece of the clear plastic and use that to hold up the ghost, because the ghost will be coming from behind. So my clear plastic I'll put back here, and that way that'll help support the ghost as he comes up. Out of the ground. And so he'll kind of be hiding behind the trees. So this clear plastic has some film on it. You want to make sure you take that off before you use it. And I'm going to cut enough so that there's support around him. And I do have some vellum glue dots that I'll be using for this. Now these are, it's glue tape, and I think it's by maybe Tombow. And you aren't supposed to be able to see the glue, so we'll see. Oh, that didn't work. What a mess. Now I'm actually okay with the fact that you can see some little threads back there, just because, I mean, it's a ghost. That's okay. And I will remove the glue that's hanging off, because we don't want that sticking on the card when you're opening and closing it. Alrighty, so there's our little ghosty. And he's going to go behind, and I'm going to use some foam tape to set him behind by a little bit. And foam tape goes on the front to then push him backwards. So now before I put him in, I do want to figure out where the tree is going to be, so that I know that I have him where you can see him. And he's not blocking things. So he's actually going to go off to the side. I'm going to use some of my little tombstones here, and before I put them on, I do kind of want to darken them up a little bit. Okay, so I decided that I wanted to have this tombstone to the left, the smaller one to the right. But before I do that, I kind of like the idea of having this angel stamp on the front of the tombstone. And the one that I thought would be good, it had to be wide enough so it wouldn't be that one, is the one with the cross on it. So I'm going to take this and stamp this just with some black ink. And stamp that on the front just to give it a little bit more interest. So I'm just taking some Memento black ink. and stamping her right there in the middle. Okay, now we're going to take these smaller tombstones and put them on the second layer forward. Now, I'm not being real careful about making sure that they're vertical or anything like that because, well, it's an old graveyard. It can be rickety and that's okay. So now we're starting to get a good amount of depth here. That's turning out really nice. So the next step is our tree. And our tree is going to go off to the left-hand side. So I do want to fold part of it back. And I'm actually going to run a piece of black strip across with only a 1/4 inch to adhere this. Since this is only going to have a 1/4 inch, I only need to cut this at 3.5. So I have a 1/4 on each side plus the 3 inches across. And score a 1/4 on each side. Now since this is only a 1/4 inch of the way, we had a 1/2 inch flap on this side, so this front edge, to keep it a 1/4 inch from the back, will line up with the front edge of that 1/2 inch flap. Okay, now you can see that that's nice and evenly spaced. I'm just going to cut the base off of this tree, since we're not going to use it down to that level. And I'm going to glue that onto that base that we just added in there. Now the other thing I need to keep in mind is the height that I'm putting this tree in at, since I don't want it to be exceeding the height of the card. So I'm actually going to use a piece of this to hold this down as I close this up. And that way I won't get glue all over as I press this down. And it won't stick to the underside of the card. And that way, this is I can stretch off the edge, just not that much. And it'll still fit in the envelope. Well, we may have to trim some trees. Alright, there we go. Now we've got our spooky tree. We've got our graveyard going on. Now we got to put the fence in and the front panel. So that front panel is going to cover up some of the stuff, and we're just going to put this piece of foam tape all the way down at the bottom of the piece. So that the gate, as I glue the gate in, it will adhere to the front edge of the card and not have this in the way. Okay, there we go. Now to glue the gate on. Off camera, I glued these pieces together, and I actually had to do it twice because the first time the glue got everywhere. And we're going to put a line of glue along this bottom and then glue it right in like that. Use our piece of protective paper here. Glue the gate in. And not press it down. Press it from behind with the bone folder to make sure that it makes a good connection. Alrighty, now we just have the side gates to put in, and before we glue those up, we want to make sure that none of the other pieces that we've put in are getting in the way of where we're trying to hold it in. And it needs to go, it can't go on the outside because then that would flap up. So it needs to go on the inside. And we may need to trim a couple of edges here. From all the pieces that we've glued in. So I'm just looking to see where it's catching. In each area where it's catching, I'm just going to snip it away. To make sure that I can get down far enough to get some glue in there. And it was catching along that front hill that we put in. It was catching on this second hill. Now this is Scotch quick dry adhesive, which means I don't have to hold this there for very long, which is good. Now, as this piece comes up, it's not in the way.